let's begin tonight at the obvious. And Dave, you wrote about this today in The Australian. China's aggression and military preparation is on full display as they lurk in the wings to take over Taiwan. Your comparison with Egypt in the 1970s is very apt. Explain the historical significance to our viewers.
Yeah, of course, and good evening, Michael. Look, in the 1967 war, the so-called Six-Day War, Israel had captured the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, basically right up to the Suez Canal, and Egypt was very hurt and stung by that defeat, of course. And in the summer of 1972 and early 1973, Egypt started to conduct large-scale military exercises adjacent to the Suez Canal, right on the front lines. And they did this a number of times, and Israel mobilised a number of times in response, thinking that a full-scale invasion was imminent. But when they actually did mount that full-scale invasion in the so-called Yom Kippur War in October 1973, the Israeli military had not mobilised because they thought it was just business as usual. And as a result, Israel suffered serious early setbacks in that war. They eventually turned the tide of that conflict. But the element of surprise was with the Egyptians because they normalised this sort of high-intensity military operations adjacent to Israeli forces. And that's exactly what China, I think, is seeking to do here across the Taiwan Strait now, normalise a high intensity and high frequency of military operations that ends up dulling Taiwanese and Western senses and means that we're going to be less prepared and have less warning of an attack.
Yeah, and Michael, it seems to me that Beijing is using these visitations by US delegations to reset the new norm. The aggression is clear. How does Taiwan respond to that?
Well, the same way Australia should: buy lots of sea mines, buy lots of missiles, and get those F-16, 75 F-16s that have been a year in the coming from the United States deployed online and their pilots trained. The situation's quite acute for Taiwan. I hope they're as aggressive in their defence of themselves as the Ukrainians and the Israelis are. You need to be, in order to show the rest of the world that you ought to be defended and supported. So they ought to be acquiring as many modern weapons as they can and showing that the Beijing that they can't be intimidated.